Before we get to all that, though, there are a few things that we need to sort out straight off the bat here, Owen. As a Kerry man, how do you feel about Cork having a Mount Rushmore that may well just be, a few metres higher than Kerry's Mount Rushmore?
I thought you were going to stop that sentence after the word Mount Rushmore initially. How do you feel about Cork having a Mount Rushmore at all? It's been a very educational experience for me going back and looking back through some of the supposed greatness of the county of Cork over the past few hours and last night and the last couple of days, really. Like you get brought up on a diet of being told that the single best thing to come out of Cork is the road to Killarney. So it is quite surprising when you see that they actually have fairly impressive sports people across a range of codes. My new favourite hobby, of course, just absolutely delighted to be here this morning to be able to say nice things about Cork and to pay them the respect that the county deserves.
It's the coronavirus dividend that the county of Cork has been waiting for, Owen Sheehan to say nice things about them. That was one of the unintended consequences of this virus, has been nice neighbourly love.
Yeah, it sure has. Obviously that there is a good case to be made that some of the great Cork people perhaps hadn't even been associated with Cork. I just going back to some of the historical figures from Cork, it's really a low point for me when I thought the great Pat O'Callaghan, the hammer thrower, was a Tipperary man, and discovered over the last 24 hours that actually no, I was wrong. He's a Cork man, as if the county actually needed any more reason to give the sense of arrogance. It's annoying when a certain bunch of people are arrogant and in your face about it and are so patriotic about their county. That is annoying on its own. But then when they actually have decent reason and you actually can't really argue against certain things, it makes it all the more frustrating because the arrogance goes nowhere. It doesn't actually lead to any sort of, I'm talking about within supporters now, it doesn't lead to any great sense of humility, which is all well and good. But if somebody is from Cork, they'll probably tell you about it. They will have the sense of Corkness, which is, of course, like the right side of arrogance, or confidence in the right side of arrogance. Maybe that's why there is a number of Mount Rushmores that could be made for Cork, but it's certainly the reason why we're here this morning, to bask in the achievements, let's put it that way, of Cork people.
What about Marina Buckley and Breach Corkery? Where do they come?
Yeah. Where did they come? I haven't really put together. So here's what I'm thinking. So we've got Colin Puig on later on to go through his Cork Mt Rushmore, and he's going to have the casting vote on all of this. So for me, there's two bankers, Roy Keane and Sonia O'Sullivan, and then there's about 6 people then that I would have in consideration for the remaining 2 slots. And Rena Buckley and Breach Corkery are 2 of them. Simple as that. 18 All-Ireland medals. Insanity that is a statistic. That 36 All-Ireland medals between 2 people, it is out of this world. And the automatic consideration you make is Jimmy Barry Murphy, or beyond that, Jack Lynch and Christy Ring when it comes to Cork GAA. But is it not a situation where we should be considering Rena Buckley and Breach Corkery on the same level as them, if not ahead of them? Now, granted, Christy Ring brings all this greatness and his lore and the legacy. He is the man of legacy when it comes to hurling in general, not just Cork GAA. But the actual achievements of individuals across 2 codes, let us not forget that. Like, Jimmy Barry Murphy is in contention here because he's got his All-Ireland in football, and obviously an unbelievable achievement. And women's football is obviously at a different place to men's football. It's a few decades behind, unfortunately, but still, it's 18, and it's not like there hasn't been a dominant county in, say, women's football in the past. Like, didn't Kerry win like 7, was it 10 in a row actually? They won. That's a statistic I should have at the top of my hand. But it's not like they had this complete runaway train where they had monopoly on women's football. It certainly seemed like that, but actually the reason why it seemed like that was because we were witnessing one of the great sports teams that Ireland has ever seen. And beside that, you had a camogie team, which was also the best camogie team of its era, and just accumulating 18 in total for each of them is a ridiculous achievement, sure. And like they have to be up there with Christy Ring and JBM for me in this consideration. And then there's only two other people I would be considering for those two spots. It's Dennis Irwin and Ronan O'Gara. And I'm going to try my best when we have these discussions to not get lulled into a sense of, oh, let's spread it out amongst the sports. If it needs to be Roy and Sonia and Rena and Breach, then so be it as the morning wages on. We're not going to just perhaps give it to one of them, but maybe we will get lulled into the sense of actually spreading it around amongst sports because it is hard to ignore someone like Ronan O'Gara, for example.
It is hard to ignore Ronan O'Gara, especially because you know that he'd be texting you after the show going, what the hell? But Dennis Irwin, I mean, Dennis Irwin's career is an all-time great Irish football career. It gets overshadowed because there is another Cork man in the team. But if Dennis Irwin was from any other county in Ireland, he would be a shoo-in for the number of titles that he won, for the fact that he was able to keep his place in the team. Bear in mind, this was the best team in world football for a period of time, and he was Mr. Dependable according to the manager. And like, he's in Ireland's all-time greatest team, and you can pick him at left back, you can pick him at right back. I'm saying he's in my all-time Ireland great team. So, and again, football is the sport that is played globally, that every kid at some point or other sees a round ball.
Ger has just frozen there. We'll try and re-establish his connection in just a moment. We might give him a call back. In the meantime, I'm going to run through what's on offtheball.com. Make sure to log on for all the news throughout the day. We've got Kevin Kilban leading the way this morning on offtheball.com. Kilban, well, it's a photograph of Kevin Kilban. Kilban explaining hurling to Hullet is an incredibly surreal moment. This was the BBC's Mark Chapman, who was on the line last night with Joe. Fantastic chat, which you can get back now on youtube.com/offtheball. Elsewhere on offtheball.com today, please celebrate with me. This is Neil Mellor on Stephen Gerrard, Olympiacos goal. 15 years, of course, over the next couple of weeks since Istanbul, since Liverpool's incredible run to winning the Champions League. Next on offtheball.com, we have Morientes pulls out his passport, Neil Mellor on LFC in Istanbul, and Mercedes Formula One making breathing devices to help fight against COVID-19. One of the good news stories, and a sporting organisation that is certainly doing good work over the last couple of days. And worrying news as well, Spurs and England legend Jimmy Greaves admitted to hospital. Jerry, you're back.
I am sorry. I was making the point about Dennis Irwin being good at football. The other thing that everybody does is they run fast, and Derval O'Rourke was an Irish sprinter who made it to elite level at a world level. Finished fourth in the World Championships, won an indoor 60-meter sprint title. Like, that would be, again, straight onto the Mount Rushmore in any other county, with the exception maybe of Dublin. But it doesn't even get mentioned. Hasn't once come up in conversation. We haven't seen anybody texting about Derval. I think Derval is a superstar that we underrate.
Just to come in there, I wonder if Derval O'Rourke and Dennis Irwin are both going to suffer from the same implicit bias over the next few hours, that because Roy Keane and Sonia O'Sullivan exist, we automatically just don't consider the next person up in that field. So obviously the next person up in athletics is Derval, and the next person up in football is obviously Dennis Irwin. And maybe there is a case to be made that is that the four of them could be the Mount Rushmore. But like, I seriously would be considering Irwin ahead of Rog, ahead of Christy Ring, ahead of JBM as well, ahead of Rena and Breach, like, because of what you say. Like, if you the criteria why Roy Keane is an absolute banker is because he was at the very top of his game in a game that was truly worldwide, that was truly global. But Dennis Irwin was of a fairly similar ilk. Like, you look at the 10-year awards they did for the Premier League, what was it, 2002, 2003, after they'd done 10 seasons, like Dennis Irwin makes that team. Like, it's Henry, it's Canton, it's Pires, it's Vieira, it's Desai, Stam, like, and it's Dennis Irwin. This is the level we're talking about here. This is not some sort of cult Irish hero. The furthest thing from it, and I know nobody needs us to tell him that this morning. 7 Premier League titles, twice in the PFA Team of the Year. Like, this is a real contender, and the more you talk about it, the more you're like, you can't leave him out.
Yeah, I wonder if Duffer make the Dublin one. I'm not sure, but certainly he's in the conversation for it on the basis of having won a Premier League with Chelsea. Let's get to some of the comments here, right? Keane Fahy says, Roy, Rog, whoever. Sue Murphy from Off the Ball says, we're essentially just giving Colin Puig the opportunity to go on about Cork forever. I mean, we have to listen to that shite in the office. we shouldn't inflict it on the public. Well, this is kind of where the idea comes from too. And Valerie Mackay has been in touch to say Rena Buckley for sure. So she's picking Rena. She obviously would have played with Rena and Breach. And, I mean, I think you were making the case pretty strongly. One or both of them certainly is deserving of a place on the mountain. Jamie Wall says Roy, Rog, Sonia and Jack Lynch. Like, I didn't see Jack Lynch play, but his achievement is fairly spectacular as well. Were his all sequential? Was there a period of his that were all in a row? So like he won an All Ireland every year for a number of years. Anthony, go on.
No, I'll certainly check that up while you're going on there.
Rob says Dr. Pat, JBM, blessed be his holy name. Anthony O'Callaghan says Roy, Sonia, Irwin, and Christy. Interesting, Jamie Wall didn't put Christy Ring on his. Patrick Healy says this could run for weeks due to the fact we've produced the greatest sportsmen and sportswomen on the island of Ireland for decades. As for the rest, they don't really matter. Corkigaboo. See, that's exactly the point you're making. And I do feel like this could have been a week-long. The Cork episode could actually be something that we do week-long where, somebody comes and makes the case. I think you have to have Roy Keane on this, right? I don't think that there's any ifs, ands, or buts about that. I think the same about Sonia, because she dominated at middle distance for so long in the world and wins, how many Olympic silver medals do we have on the track in the modern era? I can't think of any else. We obviously have Wayne McCullough has a silver. There's not a whole heap of them knocking about. So that's that level she's at. And after that, like you could literally debate this back and forth for a week. Tom O'Donoghue says we're going to need a bigger mountain. That's the joy of this, is that you only have room for the four. Jimmy Barry Murphy, Christy Ring, Billy Morgan, and Kildare legend Larry Tompkins, says Fergal Doyle. I put Billy Morgan in a conversation. I think Billy Morgan has that, is still involved in Cork GAA at a very high level, like coaching Sigerson teams, and is still influential at a point where most other people of that vintage have gone, right, my bit is done here. But, he's still given brilliant post-match interviews. He gave one to Oisin at the end of a Sigerson game this year. He was in goals when they were winning All Irelands in the 70s. Like, that's 5 decades of service to Cork GAA, which includes going toe-to-toe with the Meath team. And that Meath team would have been an all-time great team if they hadn't run into that Cork team. Like, if that Meath team had come up against the dregs of the Kerry team, they would have hammered them year in, year out. But that Cork team went toe-to-toe with them and prevented them from winning 4 All-Irelands or 5 All-Irelands when actually they were probably good enough to do so. So I think, that's Billy Morgan's team. Obviously, he has a very strong Kildare influence. And maybe Larry Tompkins should be on this.
I think that's a stretch. I think that, unfortunately, great teams, obviously, but you're birthed into greatness, people will say, because you're from Cork, but you're also birthed into a very strong competition to get onto the Mount Rushmore, and it's far too strong for any football-only person from Cork to make it. Unfortunately, that's the case. And yes, it is.
Is it? Just
it is.
No, hang on. No, wait. Think about this. So this goes back to my argument about why Tyrone's achievements in the noughties are superior to those of Kerry. And I know immediately your defence mechanism, your hackles rise. But doing something for the first time in a long time, ending a famine, being the best player on the team, carrying the team the way Larry Tompkins did, like that deserves consideration. He wrestles that team to All-Ireland glory. That absolutely deserves consideration for a place on a Mount Rushmore. Everybody else is winning stuff. Like the hurlers are birthed into a tradition where they expect to win. Those footballers in Cork do not expect to win.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think that if you're from Cork, you expect to win, full stop, or you expect you definitely have maybe an air of naive arrogance about you in certain eras. Like, I mean, if you want to go back through that era of the 2000s, like Cork not winning an All-Ireland in that year, in that decade is probably criminal, because I would have thought prior to the last Mayo team, they were on course to be one of the best teams to not win an All-Ireland until, of course, 2010. So maybe that does feed into your idea that perhaps they didn't expect to win, considering they didn't manage to get over the line in the noughties at all. But I just don't think so. Like, I think if it's another county, of course, like with the exception of maybe Dublin and Kerry and maybe Galway, like I just don't think that those football achievements alone are enough to get you anywhere near this Mount Rushmore, actually. I think even if there was a second Mount Rushmore, you actually would not make it with those football-only achievements. That being said,
I think that's wrong. I think we're underestimating the importance of somebody like Tompkins. So, for example, if Larry Tompkins had done what he did for Galway and ended their famine, if he was the main player on the team that wins in '98, he's straight on, right? So that '98 team, that Galway '98 team, are going to have one, if not two, people on Galway's Mount Rushmore, right?
I
At
don't
least
know.
one.
Yeah, okay. I would assume so.
Yeah, so I think that's we're underestimating the importance of Larry Tompkins and Cork GA.
No, I
Uh,
think you're
yeah,
underestimating the amazing depth that Cork has. If you're like, you can't just compare Cork with Galway. Like like as much as it pains me to say it, these are vastly different things. Cork is streets ahead of a lot of other people when it comes to this. Like the only county really is Dublin that we will have any similar sort of conversation about this. Galway, a few rungs below Cork, without question. Cork and Dublin are streets ahead of everybody else when it comes to the wealth of talent that they've had. Of course, this is as a result of population. Cork people will tell you it's something in their blood, but no, it's because of population. It's because you got a bloody big city. You got a lot of people.
Here.
Chances are one of those people are going to be generational talents. Well done to you. But no, like I just think that you Google, although if you Google Cork's greatest sports people, the fourth result is Graham Canty. So maybe Google is telling me that there should be a footballer only on this.
Well, hang on, sorry. We haven't mentioned the rowers. They haven't come in once.
Good point. Good point.
I completely forgotten. We haven't mentioned the rowers. And I was like, oh, Olympic silver medals. Who else has one from? I mean, I was thinking of athletics. So yeah, look, wow.
Is it too soon?
That's our excuse for overlooking them so far in the conversation, and to everybody who has been getting in touch with us on Twitter. So where are the rowers? And Vincent O'Brien was one of John Duggan's shouts from for his influence on horse racing, not even mentioned in dispatches apart from by John Duggan. Right here, get rid of Mount Rushmore. US propaganda, change it to Shandon's Four Faces. Richard Barry says Pat O'Callaghan, first Irish athlete to win a medal under the Irish flag, 2 gold medalist hammer thrower. Sonia, Roy Keane, Breach Corkery. Can we have more? It's criminal to leave out Ring, O'Gara, Irwin, Buckley, Heffernan, Roy, Ring, Sonia, Pat O'Callaghan, double Olympic gold medal. And then this one, the conversation here was Mick Foley from the Sunday Times saying there's planning for 4 Mount Rushmores, one overlooking the city, one near Youghal, above in Mallow, and one back around Barley Cove near Mizzen. And there'll be a ferocious bun fight to fill those 16 places. You could have 4. You could definitely have 4. Serena Buckley says Sarah Hegarty. Name a more decorated athlete in the country. Obviously, Rena and Breach fairly similarly decorated. Jimmy Barry Murphy, Roy Keane, Christy Ring, and surely Dave Barry. Dave Barry, not mentioned yet. 2 All-Irelands, a league title with Cork City, and burst the onion bag against Bayern Munich. Legend. See, Dave Barry, somebody has to get on for that crossover from, I can do many things. I think that's, there's a shout to have Dave Barry involved. Because it feeds into your soccer and GAA.
Yeah, the I can do many things. The dual code thing is a theme in Cork, but actually going from inside the GA to outside the GA actually isn't as common as you might think. So it's not the worst shot. It's just that there are so many great people here who you actually just can't even consider. Like so many achievements that would be a banker in any other county, but in Cork's situation, they don't even come close. They don't even get into the second Mount Rushmore, as I said. So that accounts for someone like Dave Barry, I'm afraid.
Let's talk about the main news story of this or any other day. It is who are Cork's greatest sports people. And the greatest Cork man in our office is none other than Colin Puig, whose job it is to tell us who he is going to put on Cork's sporting Mount Rushmore. Colin, good morning to you.
Lads, how are you?
Nathan Murphy said he didn't sleep the night before he came on here and ballsed up the Mayo selection. So, how are you doing, Colin?
Well, sir, it goes like this. I got a call from our beloved OTB AM producer, Tommy Rooney, the other day, asking me to be the representative for Cork Mt Rushmore. I accepted dutifully. I was honoured. It wasn't just the fact that I'm the only Cork person and off the ball at all. So I took up that chance. And when the phone call ended, pleasant phone call, 10 seconds later, I had my 4 choices. And those 4 choices have not left my head since then. And they will not be removed. In fact, they are already being carved into Cork Mt Rushmore on the top of Patrick's Hill in Cork City to overlook the whole Cork. My 4
so
names,
look down,
right?
So look down. Well, give us your first 3, right? Well, okay. No, how about me and Owen try and predict exactly who you're going to go for? You're going to go for Roy Keane. You're going to go for Sonia Sullivan. You're going to go for.
This is outrageous. This is outrageous.
Who are you going to?
Not necessarily.
Who are you going to? for? You're going to go for. I think you might go for Dennis Irwin because you're a Man United fan.
Dennis Irwin is 100% making an appearance.
No, that's what people think I will do. So I won't do that.
Well,
right?
exactly. That's what. So your second, you're double bluffing us here by being out of character for this one day. You're being magnanimous. I think you are going to go for Christy Ring because you're a bit of a traditionalist when it comes down to it, and I actually don't know who your fourth is going to be. Who do you think he's gone for, Owen?
100% Dennis Irwin. He's we've got a football man on the line, a Cork man, and a Manchester United man on the line. Dennis Irwin, Roy Keane, Sonny O'Sullivan, and Jimmy Barry Murphy. I think might actually be number 4. That's who I think Colm is going to pick.
Right. To quash all these rumours, my 4, right? Each of my 4 reached the pinnacle of their respective sports. Each of my 4 transcended the sports in which they played to become cultural icons. But most importantly, each of my 4 people are instantly recognisable when you mention their first name.
So that's Christy, Roy, Sonia, and
Jimmy.
Rena.
No.
Derval.
I mean, think closer to home, lads. No. Think closer to home.
Okay, let's start. Roy Keane is number 1,
yes.
right? No questions asked. Like, no debate about this. The best player on the best team for a long period of time, the highest paid player at Manchester United per his contract, the heartbeat of that team, dragged Ireland to a World Cup, unfortunately didn't play in it, did play in a World Cup and was our best player as a young player. And so I don't think there's any debate. I did see somebody saying that they could have somebody else ahead of him because it would be less fractious, but that was bollocks. So anyway, okay, so he's number 1. Sonia O'Sullivan is on the list, right?
Of course, yeah, you have to be. And actually, what I found interesting about Sonia in all of this, what I'm seeing on Twitter and people going mad with suggestions saying this person should be in instead of this person, that's a disgrace, even though I haven't said the list yet. But the one person who hasn't been debated at all about their removal is Sonia. Everybody says, yeah, Sonia's definitely in. And she deserves to be in because her record is unbelievable. And also she's a great person. And she's probably, out of the 4 I have, is the biggest role model, I would say, to both genders of all ages. So Sonia's undoubted. But, you know, there's not much to be said either. Like, there's not a whole lot more to say about Roy Keane. But we can still say it to emphasise. I mean, Roy Keane's probably the greatest sportsman the country's ever produced. No?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to argue against that take. I think if you're making an Ireland Mount Rushmore, I think Roy Keane makes it definitely. I think that there's definitely a case to be made for him being Ireland's greatest sports person as well in terms of pure achievements. And like for me, that's what this should be, Colin. It is about pure achievement and pure greatness. Being a role model is fantastic and all, but for me, it's not about the role models in this. This is pure cold etching stone into a mountain. So it's achievement only, and I think Sonny's achievement obviously makes her definitely one of the top 2 candidates for this. But like Roy Keane, in terms of somebody who has achieved unbelievable things in a sport that is so competitive, so well watched, a global superstar in that sport, I don't think anybody actually would touch him in an Irish sense, let alone a Cork sense. Now, like you might be referring to George Best perhaps or something like that as somebody who might come close, but other than that, he has everything. He ticks every box when it comes to greatness.
But he also he had to work. He had to work for it too because he started off slowly. He was working on Foss course. Nottingham Forest gave him his chance. Debut away to Liverpool. Brian Clough says to him, "Son, you can do 2 things. You can keep the ball and you can pass the ball." And he ended up doing that for the rest of his career. That culminated in the British transfer record to Manchester United. 7 Premier League titles, Champions League, 4 FA Cups. Stood up to bullies, walked out in 2002 World Cup, left United 3.5 years later, and wowed our audience last September in Bargash Energy Theatre too. So he has it all. And also, just a personal story about Roy too. When I was 12 years old, I flirted with death big time in Spain. I went through a glass door and I had a couple of life-saving operations. So I was in Spain recuperating. It was very touch and go for a while. But in the meantime, Roy was helping out in the background. Someone got in touch with him. And when I got back to Cork, I had a jersey sent from Roy Keane that he wore against Sturm Graz in the Champions League in 1987. So I have that signed up on the wall at home in Cork. And when we had our roadshow last September in the Bargash, I went up and thanked him in person. And he very much humoured me for 30 seconds. And he was like, no problem at all. And actually, the person who sorted it out, the middleman, was a very, very close friend of his who was subsequently passed away. So we were talking about that on the night. And it was brilliant. He was just saying, oh yeah, there's no problem at all. And that's the side of him that people don't know, because there's obviously the very contentious side. Some of the stuff he does you're not going to agree with, but that's the other side that he gets no publicity for at all. And he was very kind to me that night because he went along with the charade.
I mean, obviously he remembered it, and you were the guy seems like it was an important character in his life, because he was able to reach out, and that was when Keane was at his absolute peak. It's those couple of years. So before and after he comes back from his cruciate, he's at his absolute peak. He scores the winning goal in a World Club Cup final. Like, they are world champions, and he scores the winning goal in it. And then the next year is the year that they come out of the FA Cup. So the tournament is kind of happens at an earlier stage. So they're actually only World Club champions for a very short period of time. I might have that's certainly in my memory that's what happened. But he scores the winner in a World Cup final, like, for Manchester United. It is absolutely the stuff of dreams, and we do underrate. I think you might be right. He is probably first straight up on Ireland's mountain, so he's got to be first on Cork's as well. Yeah, what are your criteria? Because Nathan's criteria were a bit like made up, essentially. He was like, I could put this guy who won, was it 5 Olympic gold medals on, but actually I know Kev, and I'm going to his wedding, so I'm putting Kev on instead. That was essentially, when it came down to it, when it boiled down to it, that was Nathan Murphy's level of analysis. What are yours?
Yeah, well, that's because, like, Nathan had to get clever, really, to think about who's actually going to make this on the Mayo 4. But the Cork 4, there were so many. So I was saying to Tommy Rooney beforehand that I actually have selected a 4 most talented Cork to go on a separate Mount Rushmore that we'll put up in Myrtleville, I think. So for this one, it was purely based on achievement, and as I said at the start of this, reaching the pinnacle of their sport as well. And also what was very important for me, and there was a lot of living legends and those who have passed who haven't made this, because I had to be diverse. As you well know, Cork is a great sporting county throughout loads of sports, so I had to have a representative of each sport, or as many as possible, obviously. And those individuals had to be at the pinnacle.
Not sure about that. Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
I heard you say it earlier on. I was like, it doesn't matter. You have to go by individual achievement. No, this is for the people of Cork. I'm speaking on behalf of our county, and I could not return to my county if the 4 people I chose were not on my Mount Rushmore, because
so Rog is on.
Rog is on. Yeah, of course Rog is on. I mean, that's no debate at all. I couldn't believe it on Twitter when people saying, "Oh, get rid of Rog." It's unbelievable. 128 Irish caps, 1,083 test points, the most ever for Ireland, 4th most ever. 557 Six Nations points. The drop goal versus Wales, the 3 Triple Crowns, the performances in the Heineken Cup final in 2006, 2008. In 2011, the drop goal against Northampton. A week later against Castres. His try against Toulouse in 2000. His try against Leinster in 2006 when he's celebrating before he goes over. The list is endless. In 2010, he was voted the player who contributed most to the Heineken Cup in his first 15 years. Rugby Hall of Fame 2016. And they're just the stats. They're just the cold, hard stats. But also what O'Gara did, and it was part of my 3 criteria at the start, he transcended sport. He's a cultural icon. Everybody knows who Ronan O'Gara is, right? And the feelings that he has elicited, not just in Cork, but in the country, from what he's done on the pitch, is phenomenal. And also, there's not many people who would sit there in silence for 5.9 seconds when Joe Malloy asked them a question live on national TV to decipher Ireland's performance against England. But Ronan's his own man. He's quintessentially Cork. He just sat there and he was like, no, I'll answer my own good time. I'm getting emotional here. Like Raj, this is unquestionable. I was offended on behalf of Ronan that it was even a consideration that he wasn't in this list. And I know what you're saying. The biggest name I've heard in terms of the omission from my list is Jimmy Barry Murphy. And I completely understand that. What he achieved as a player in hurling and football, what he achieved as manager in hurling in 1999, nearly again 2013. Unbelievable. And what a player. The goal against Galway in 1983 from a million miles out. Brilliant. But the thing with Jimmy Barry Murphy is, right, like, shoot me down if you want, but I'm going to say it, right? There's no genuine consideration of talk that Jimmy Barry Murphy is the greatest hurler of all time, nor the greatest footballer of all time, and nor the greatest manager of all time. Whereas Christy Ring is often regarded as the greatest hurler of all time. And for a long time, he had won the most All-Irelands, scored the most points. It was only really when Kilkenny started dominating in this century that went by the wayside. But 8 All-Irelands for Christy Ring. And the fact that he would just, in an instant, turn a game whenever he wanted. And if you look, it takes 2 seconds to research. His peers at the time say he was, you can compare him to Pele in hurling. And he was that good, and he could turn it on anytime he wants to. And actually, when I was researching Christy, because obviously, none of us saw him, but I was asking my dad, I was asking Billy Boohig, did you ever see him play when you were very young? And he said he did. He saw him play in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, the early 1960s. He had a free from the 21-metre line, straight into the top corner. And he said everybody in the goal line ducked. And he ducked behind the goal too, because he thought it was going to go through the net. The guy was phenomenal. And he was doing this in his 40s. Like, the thing is, he won his first 4 All-Irelands. By the time he was 24, he'd won his 4th. But funnily enough, he's associated most with his longevity. Like, his career with Cork spanned 4 decades, from the late 1930s to the early 1960s. So, again, when I saw 1 or 2 people on Twitter saying, oh, geez, I might have JBM instead of Christy Ring, I was like, Jesus. And I know there's a JCB full of JBM worshippers coming towards this Mount Rushmore to knock it down. But I'm sorry, he can't get in. He can't.
You talked about being a cultural icon, right? And I think that's the thing that JBM had. It was the sideburns, it was those white jerseys that the football team played in, that the footage today still looks like. GA has never been sexier than when he was free running as a Gaelic footballer. And I think also the fact that it's colour TV footage of hurlers with no helmets, which is the glory days of us knowing who these people were. That's one of the big issues with, they put helmets on everybody and suddenly we don't know what everybody looks like. So there's an iconography associated with JVM that just Christy Ring doesn't have, because certainly now there are few enough people left who actually saw him in his absolute pomp, who can explain to us that, yeah, he was better than Shefflin, or he could do this that TJ Reid couldn't do, or actually, he was a combination of those 2 players. And so therefore you would automatically, if someone came and explained he's a cross between TJ Reid and Henry Shefflin, you'd be like, well, I mean, I'm sorry, but there's absolutely no way he can't be on it. But you did make the point about JBM being the manager of the team in '99, which gets overlooked. That's a team, again, festooned with kids that needs a sense of identity, and that identity comes from having this legend of the game being the cool, steady hand. Obviously, the good coaches around that team as well. So, look, I can see both sides of this argument. I can absolutely see both sides of this argument.
You see, the thing with, like, I completely understand the JBM fanfare, and he was definitely the 5th Beatle in this, if you want to call it. But for Christy Ring, like, his impact as a cultural icon is unquestioned. If you were to paint a picture of Cork, and how would you illustrate Cork in one painting? And if Christy Ring was not in that painting, it wouldn't be a fair representation of Cork.
In fairness,
like, when his funeral took place, it took 3 hours for the funeral procession to go from the 20-minute journey from Cork City to his hometown of Clyne. It took 3 hours. Like, people were weeping. Jack Lynch, his former teammate, ex-Taoiseach, said it at his own funeral. As long as hurling is played, the story of Christy Ring will be told. And I think he completely transcends the sport. When you think of Cork sporting legends, he comes into everybody's mind. That's why when the call ended with Tommy the other day, when he asked me to pick my 4, he was in there within the first 10 seconds. And he hasn't budged.
There's also the situation, if you refer to Jimmy Barry Murphy's sideburns and the style icon that he was, Christy Ring's hat is up there. If you could have items in the GAA museum, you might have Jimmy Barry Murphy's sideburns for sure, but you'd also have Christy Ring's hat. So I think using the phrase icon with regards to any GAA person in Cork, Christy Ring is the winner. Like, the question you have on a Gaelic Games level, Colm, is whether the modern dominance of Cork and Camogie and women's football warrants inclusion. For me, that's actually a greater question here, as opposed to who's actually the bigger icon between Jimmy Barry Murphy and Christy Ring. 18 All-Ireland medals is surely something that you can't ignore. It's obviously something that you did because you were like, this is my 4 and that's it. Between Dennis Irwin and between the 18 All-Ireland medals, 36 between 2 women, there is, I think, more of a consideration than you think for the top 4 Cork sports people.
I have no doubt that Rena Buckley and Breach Corkery are both very hard done by here. Their accumulation of medals is it's actually ridiculous. And the fact that Rena captained as well in both disciplines. Look, if I could extend this Mount Rushmore, I would, but I can't, lads. I have to have a representative. That's why this is hard. But I don't think if you ask Rena or Breach, and if I said, look up there now, look up on Patrick's Hill, who would you take down? Who, lads? Who would you take down?
I'm sorry, but you can't do that.
You absolutely can if they were up for it. I'd show them.
If Roy Keane was there, right?
Yeah,
he would be like, look, what are you putting me up there for? You're not putting the postman up for delivering the mail. But actually, maybe after this, we all will put postmen up, and we probably should do because they're absolute heroes. But anyway, his point is, blah blah blah. He's too humble. You can't be asking people to be. Oh, I should be up there. Take down Christy Ring. That's a very unfair question, Colin. I think, and an unfair way of you're not really into your medals here. The Dennis Irwin argument. Dennis Irwin reached the absolute peak, in football, which is the most played sport in the world. He made it all the way to Manchester United and stayed there. So I just Cork exceptionalism is important, and the rowers, not even a hint of mention for the rowers.
Look, give Gary and Paul O'Donovan another 10 or 20 years' time, and they'll be on the updated version of Mount Rushmore. Certainly, Paul. I've no doubt about that. And look,
just to put a little bit of pressure on Paul now, obviously watching this. Does Paul need to win a gold medal to get on?
Really, the COVID might screw him over in terms of him being included in your Mount Rushmore. What if his peak was 2020?
What does he need a gold? Does he need a gold medal literally to get on this?
No. Look, I have Sonia O'Sullivan on this, and she got a silver medal at the Olympics. But it's what she did over her whole career. Sonia had that record, that 2,000 meter record, which was only broken in 2017. That started in 1994, and she was the fastest in the world. It was 1,500. 2,000, 3,000 meters. I actually think, and of course the World Championship as well in 1995. That summer of 95, I think she won 32 of her 33 races that summer. But I actually think the disappointment and the heartbreak of Atlanta in 96 kind of actually helped Sonia's story because of the redemption in 2000. And again, I have to go back to the cultural influence because I remember that race in 2000 in Sydney. I was in school and school stopped for 15 minutes and everybody watched this one TV, and I was seeing teachers who had never expressed any emotion whatsoever other than being a teacher lose their mind when Sonny was running down that home straight trying to catch that gold spot.
I get total emotion watching it now to this day because it was fulfilled after everything. You're right. Look, I don't think Sonya's going down for any reason. There's been a lot of debate here and we're actually out of time right now, so I might talk to you again a little bit later on to make you defend yourself against some of the other people who are making very rational arguments about this. Colin, well done. You put your head above the parapet. You've made your decision. You're going to live or die by that decision. It's hard to argue with some of it, but we're going to do our best anyway. Colin Boohig there giving us Cork's Mt Rushmore. 087 918 180 is the number to WhatsApp us on. It is coming up to 9 o'clock this morning, and this is OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. We are on air from 7:30 to 10 during lock-in or lockdown. We're not done yet, obviously. After the break, very special guest going to join us for the OTB Culture Club, brought to you by Now TV, and it's Dermot Kennedy. If you happen to miss any of the show this morning, don't worry. You can subscribe to the OTB AM podcast stream wherever you get your podcast. We timestamp it so you can just scroll through to whatever you want. On last night's football show, Mark Chapman of the BBC joined Joe, and of course, he had a Kevin Kilbane story.